Hello and welcome to the 11th episode of Kerbal Space Endeavour. And this episode is going to be quite interesting because I want to see how much stuff I can compress into one episode. So in the last episode, we were launching a long-distance satellite into a polar orbit, but because of a mishap in the staging, I was not able to put it into the orbit that I wanted it to get into. So once again, I have to start a refueling mission. And we don't have any docking ports on board our satellite, so I brought the grappler along. This is still the old staging or launch stage, but when I built it, I somehow messed up and didn't put on 4 RCS thrusters on each side, so I had a little bit of trouble once I got to the satellite. And as you can see, I'm always trying to turn around and trying to get control over it, and it was not really that easy. And most interestingly enough, and yep, I just bounce into it and it doesn't work. So we'll try this again, just turn on RCS, orientate ourselves, and yeah. So yeah, fun part. When we finally do attach it, somehow we mystically attach like 2 meters behind the engine, but it is enough and it works somehow. And we refuel the satellite just in case if we detach it and we want to alter the orbit or something. It's always good to have the refuel done. I mean, we brought the fuel, so let's just use the fuel. So yeah, we just get in position and then we just accelerate to get into a quite high orbit. So there will always be a connection, or the period of time when we are behind Kerbal is very small. So yeah, we should always have connection when we finally send our first interplanetary mission. So of course we send this craft back, the launch stage, back towards Kerbal for recovery. And now we just switch back and circularize our orbit with the fuel that we transferred into our satellite. Just basic stuff, straightforward. And of course our launch stage has a nice descent back towards the planet Kerbal. But as usual, things go a little bit wrong and my launch stages definitely need some redesigning. Moving on, we launch a new craft, which is the second part that we need for our special mission. And this is a pretty much a probe, and there the launch stages crashed into each other again. Great. And once again, things are flipping out and we're spinning into space instead of flying into space. I'm just always too impatient with these launches. But yeah, so here we detach this wonderful thing, and what this is a drive stage with a big satellite, with 2 big satellite dishes on board. So this we will bring into an orbit around Duna. And then at the very tip we have a small probe, which then will go also, first it will fly around Duna, and then it's going to switch orbit over to Ike and it will start surveying the planets. So we said before, the challenge is to always survey planets before we get there, but with manned missions. So somehow this is the nuclear engine. I have near future propulsion installed, the mod, which changes the nuclear engine to use, instead of liquid fuel and oxidizer, it uses liquid hydrogen. And after a while I was able to get rid of those jettisoned protections of the engine. They were kind of stuck on before, but then somehow they got away. So yeah, this thing works with liquid hydrogen, and we should have more than enough delta V to get us to Duna, get us into a stable polar orbit, and everything. But yeah, let's move on while we wait for the window of opportunity to go to Duna, which will be in approximately 11 days. So yeah, this is the next stage we're launching. I'm skipping the boring part. I used a little bit of fuel getting into a good orbit, so I thought I'm gonna refuel the liquid hydrogen on our Duna satellite. And somehow I still used the wrong staging launch stage, because I didn't put on the 4 RCS this time again. So you see me spinning around. And what happened here was, because I was on the dark side of the planet, I had no power and therefore no more connection, no more control of my vehicle, and of course I spin out of control and things go horribly wrong, as they tend to do in my series. But in the end, I do make it, and I have installed a new mod which is called TAC Fuel Balancer that is finally upgraded to version 2.24.2, and it lets me transfer fuels around without having to click every little thing. So yeah, after refueling this, we're also sending this stage back home. And now we move on to yet another launch. As I said, I promised a lot of launches, and here's the next one. So while this thing stays in orbit and waits for its window of opportunity to go to Duna, we launch a new stage. And I took some time and edited my launch stages, and this is my heavy launch stage 1, which hopefully we'll see more in the future. And here we get rid of our fairings, and you see some cool new stuff. First of all, this thing at the front is our space truck, which will bring our modular colonization systems to Minmus. So yes, we are planning to build a base on Minmus. And the fairing you see right here is very, very special, because what I made there in the inside, you see there's still another fairing. In there is the core that lets me control the vehicle, because at the moment I don't have the proper probe bodies yet to build them just within the launching stage. So I had to build this little contraption right here where the solar panels fold out of the fairings and everything, but it actually looks cool and it works fairly fine. Now I know I do only show a certain bits and pieces of my videos. As I said, the full experience of all of what I'm doing you can find on my Twitch channel, where you find all of the playtime that I have completely unedited. And yeah, so if you want to check out the full thing, watch me on Twitch, or you just have the summarized and time accelerated versions and commented versions right here. Okay, so after bringing the space truck into orbit, we fly up yet another launch. And yeah, I guess we'll just skip a lot of this. This is our first payload, which is the colony core, the C3 colony core from the MKS modular colonization mod. The mod is quite it's a little bit complicated, but I will hope and I feel confident that I will be able to figure it out, because it lets you actually build self-sustaining bases on different planets, so you don't need to get any more food, oxygen, or anything else. But more of that we will see in the future. Here I switched to the space truck to set myself up and rendezvous with this thing, because I wanted to save as much RCS as I can, and that big launch stage is very sluggish. So I transferred some fuel around, and then we just go into the detaching mode. And yeah, this thing is prepped and ready, and yeah, more of that later. So this launch stage is a lot better than before, but it still needs some work and some adjusting. I lost some parachutes on my way down, which is very inconvenient. But at least we don't burn up in the atmosphere, and we still have connection while we're descending, which I didn't have with my other stages, or only sometime. But even though things don't always go right, so yeah, I have some more explosions for you guys. Okay, so back to the trucker. We set ourselves up to have an encounter with Minmus. And yeah, it's just basic maneuvering. And I really like the hot rocket mod that gives these really nice particle effects on all of these engines. So yeah, here we set up ourselves with an encounter from Minmus. Also, we put on some alarm clocks, so we do know, or actually when I time accelerate, I stop at the right time. Because I'm quite clumsy like that, and I always mess up when time accelerating, and then I warp through planets, or a lot of other stuff goes wrong. So yeah, we have an encounter. We set ourselves up so we come in as close as possible to Minmus. And yeah, that looks quite decent. I mean, there's a lot better ways to do this, but that's the way I do it, and I guess if you don't like it, you just have to deal with it. So yeah, we're circularizing our orbit, and now we have to take a look where we're going to build our base. And with MKS, there's new resources besides carbonite, which is an extra mod, but we have substrate, ore, equalizer, and minerals. And we will need these later on if we want to have a permanent base on this planet. But right now I'm looking more in the direction we want carbonite and we want substrate, because we want to create food later on. And yeah, the spot that I picked out is right here, which has a lot of carbonite and a little bit of substrate. It doesn't have too much, but I probably don't need too much, because the base that I'm going to build here is not going to be that big. So yeah, with a little bit of post-editing, we jump ahead. And if you look in the top right corner of the screen, you see my liquid hydrogen is running very, very, very low. And I came to realize I didn't bring enough fuel along to get back home. And yeah, I will have to come up with a genius idea to come back home. However, when we land, this is a new biome, the lowlands, we can do some new science. So the crew reports reads, "You wonder why you're still sitting in your capsule while there's so much fun to have outside." And of course that's true, so let's jump out and take a surface sample from the lowlands. You take a handful of snow, ice, and dirt and put it into a sample bag. You hope the science team on Kerbal will figure out what it is and why it is not suitable for Kerbal consumption. But we just said we wanted to construct a base here and use substrate to obtain food. So, inconsistencies. And the EV report read, "You look up at the highlands and wonder out loud whether you could jump over them. Mission Control advises you not to try." Alright, so I said I didn't have enough fuel to get back home. But if you remember, we left something in orbit around Minmus that actually still has some fuel in it. And yes, it is the Minmus lander from a few missions ago. So my plan is to rendezvous with the lander, dock the lander, and then use the leftover fuel in both of these craft to get back to Kerbal. 'Cause I don't want our good Mr. Dunbus to die. So yeah, we have still a whole bunch of RCS fuel on board, which will also be helpful for us to get back home. The thing is, I have less than 300 meters per second of delta V left when both stages are connected. And 300 meters per second is definitely not enough to get back to Kerbin and circularize my orbit. So what I will have to do is we're going to have to do an aerobrake. And let's hope we do not explode. But yeah, that will be coming up right away. First of all, though, we have a successful docking. I checked that everything is prepped the way I wanted to. I transferred the fuel around so all 4 engines on the lander have fuel, because if you remember, I transferred them over to only 2 of the engines having power. But now we set up our maneuver to escape the influence of Minmus, to get out of it so we can finally set up a proper maneuver to get back to Kerbin. I know there's better ways to do this, but I was pretty scared I would not make it back home, so that's the way I did it. And as we look at our Kerbal alarm clock, we notice that our window for the transfer to Duna is coming up. So let's switch over to our Duna satellite and get rid of this alarm clock right here. And now we just set up a maneuver to get to Duna. And just simple and basic forward, and just accelerate towards it. If you're wondering why the ion engines on the probe in the front are fired up, they are not. It is a bug that I haven't figured out yet why it is there. It just looks like it's working, but it is not. However, we have an almost encounter with Duna, and I set myself another alarm clock. So we have an encounter, or actually I have an alarm clock, which will tell me to change my trajectory at a certain given time, so I have the perfect entry into the Duna system. Okay, and now back to our let's save our pilot mission. And we just used up all of our liquid hydrogen, so now we use the fuel of the lander, and as you can see we are at 250 meters per second right now, and as you can see our periaps is still way too high. So I feared, okay, there was some science to do, but it was something we just left out a few years before, and it's not really that important. More important is, how are we going to get him back home? Yeah, let's just collect the gravity scan. Where is it? All of this needs a little bit of redesigning and done better. But whatever, I'll get there. So let's get back in here, and yeah, we don't have enough fuel to circularize our orbit. As you can see right here, we would need more delta V than we have left. So even when adjusting it just a little bit, I don't have enough, as you can see right above my nav ball. Okay, but I realized we still have more than enough RCS on board. So with a little bit of adjustment, we get into an orbit. So we will have some deceleration due to the atmosphere of Kerbin. But is this really going to work? Is our pilot going to survive? Well, we're gonna see all of this in the next episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this, and as I promised, there was a lot of switching between crafts back and forth. From now on, my Kerbal Space Endeavour will get a lot more interesting because more stuff will be happening at the same time. If all of this is a little bit too confusing, just tell me in the comments. I'll try to make it a little bit more snippy. However, my name's Antilles. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.